All right guys, welcome back to YouTube. It's a pleasure to be back on YouTube. Obviously it's kind of a little bit of a welcome back and it's kind of not because I've still been posting, but it's been just short form content from my long form MBW stuff. So don't get me wrong, like MBW is still a huge focus of mine, but I'm lucky enough to be in a position now where we've got an amazing team of athletes that we're providing content on like a weekly basis. So there's only really enough room for me to have one video a month or one video every 6 weeks. So we're going to bring the YouTube back for my contest prep. So I'm 22 weeks out this weekend as of recording. By the time you watch this, we're working on a schedule where probably in and around 1 or 2 weeks after recording. So I'm probably in and around like 18 to 19 weeks out by the time that you watch this from my first show of the 2025 season, which is going to be in May, 25th of May in the UK with the UK FBA. So if you want to come and watch, you can literally come and watch, provided of course you're from the UK. And then I'll be competing 3 weeks after in Spain, in Salou. So I hope I pronounced that somewhat accurately. And so yeah, if you're from Spain or local area, then maybe you'll come and watch me there at the INBA PNBA Worlds. So super excited for this prep. As of this morning, I am 171.6 pounds exactly. And that puts me down from my start point of 183. So bear in mind, like my last contest prep was a 25-week prep, and I went from 204 pounds down to 152. And at 14 weeks out, 15 weeks out, I was like 172. So yeah, I'm basically like 10 weeks, if not more, ahead of schedule because of course I've built a little bit of new muscle, definitely for sure. So I'd say that I'm probably maybe 15 or 16 pounds away from stage condition, which is very exciting. It's good. It's really good to be in this position where I'm so far out with really, compared to other preps, so little to do. You know, in the last 8 weeks of the 21 prep, I went from 170, 169, all the way down to 152. So it was like, right, I've got to get this fat off. You know, I was chasing, and that was just down to simply poor prep management in that year. You know, it was a very productive off season to a not so well managed prep. However, this time it's very different. I've learned a hell of a lot more in the time period that from 2021, 2020 even to 2024, 2025, where I've nailed it so many times with clients that I pretty much knew exactly what I had to do this year to get it right and have a prep that not just landed me in stage condition, but landed me with the most amount of muscle too. So yeah, super excited to share this one with you guys. Obviously today, we're no better way to start than a leg day. So I'm gonna roll you through my leg session currently at 22 weeks out. Strength is still really, really good. Today, I won't be doing the Cybex hack. I'll actually be doing the Atlantis because I have one session where I do the Cybex, one session where I do the Atlantis. So this is giving like 2020 vibes properly with the Atlantis hack. So yeah, it's gonna be good fun. Obviously got Loz alongside me for this session. She does some slightly different movements just because it makes sense in terms of like loading up machines. But she trains primarily with me for the majority of my sessions, which is very, very good. She's out of prep now, so she's starting to go on the way up. I'm coming on the way down. Kind of worked out that we barely have had any off-plan meals together since she finished prep. But we're not too fussed about that. And this will actually be also my first ever Christmas on prep. So, you know, whether people agree with it or not, it will just be a regular day for me on Christmas, following my normal diet. Because in my opinion, I have no time to lose. And it doesn't affect or change my experience of Christmas, because for me, it's about spending time with family. And I still do that. I'll still be present for all the family events. I'll just have my own stuff. And luckily enough, Loz's family, my family, both understand my goals. They really support what I do, so it doesn't affect them either. So yeah, and for anyone watching, I hope you had an amazing Christmas. For now, let's enjoy some legs. So kicking off with the toe press. So typically, well, even until like literally today's session, I've been having this right at the back end. But something I found is, one, because my stances are so low on like hacks and leg presses, I use a good bit of calf out of the stretch position anyway. So by the time I come to actually do the isolation work, my calves are actually pretty smoked. So doing this at the start actually just improved the quality of the work for me, which we all know that. We all know that if you do something at the start, it's going to improve the quality of the work. For me in the off season, I don't like to always start with calves, just because I like to place other things like maybe abs or some arm top-up work at the beginning. So, and then the session just becomes like really super, super long at the start, right? So for me, starting with this now, it then bleeds into just straight away into the adductor, into the hamstring curl, into the leg extension. So all like flows nicely as like a leg day, rather than starting with arms, abs, all those accessory things that now I either have less work to do because obviously my volume is lower because my recovery capacity is lower, or I put them onto other days. So it means the sessions are no longer like marathon sessions anymore, which is the objective really when you're dieting down. You know, it's to do really the least amount of work you need to do to retain tissue. That's really it. You know, you don't need to be striving to do as much as possible because the goal is not to grow, the goal is to retain. Two big tips for training calves. Number one, don't skip them. Number two, train them as hard as possible. Like, those are two really basic tips, but there is definitely some people watching this that you've got to have more self-awareness. If you want decent calves and you're putting them at the end of your leg session and at the end of the legs, you're smashed like everyone is, and then you skip them, you're literally not going to grow your calves. They will stay the exact same, or even worse, they'll actually regress. Especially, I see this during contest preps or diets, where people are more energy tired as well, just day to day. They want to get home, they want to eat whatever, they want to eat their post-workout. Who cares about your post-workout meal? Who cares? You may as well just do your calves and then go home and eat. You know, so I think it's just really important to like nail down those basics. And then obviously more complex tips is like, think about pausing in the stretch position. Really think about spending some time there. Try not to be too explosive into the concentric so that you're actually initiating with calf rather than bending your knee. I see a lot of this, like bending the knee in the stretch and then sort of using the elasticity to get out of the stretch. So dead pause it in the stretch. Really think about putting pressure through that front of the foot and then hard into that top position. Don't need to spend too much time there unless you really struggle to connect. And if you really do struggle to connect with your calves, don't neglect thinking about doing some single leg work. So use a toe press like this, or like an actual toe press machine, which is maybe more hip loaded, and then do some single leg stuff, because that can be really good in terms of just driving a little bit more mind-muscle connection to both of your calves individually and treat them as one unit rather than moving together. So one last thing whilst we're on the topic of calves is if they're still not growing for you, think about two more things. So one is your rep ranges. If you're going too high rep range and you stop when it hurts, like AKA a pump, the calves are really painful when they're pumped, really painful. So much so that you'll stop shy of actual muscular failure because they're so pumped. So think about going maybe more in the 8 to 10 rep range where they're not so pumped, but you're actually achieving muscular failure. You'll see with all of my sets here on calves that the last reps are really slow. Those are the reps you want to chase. You want to chase the reps that slow down in the concentric and then take a few partials and you're finished. Rather than just pumping away until kingdom come, hoping for your calves to grow, and really you're just pumping them up with blood. So actually chase hard reps. And then the final thing is frequency. So don't just train them on legs. Train them on a push and a pull day as well, and up your frequency to potentially 3 or 4 times a week. Probably 4 at the absolute max. Realistically, 3 is more than enough. And see if you can get a little bit more growth out of spreading your volume rather than doing it all on a leg day. So think about doing 2 sets, 3 times a week, spread your work, make the quality of your work really high. And if you can't grow calves with those tips, then I don't know, you just have to change your parents, I guess, at that point. Oh, shit. All right, so second movement of the day, prime adductor, which is, in my opinion, the heaviest adductor in the game. So if you can get decently strong at this, you're probably quite strong at adductors. But then the only issue with that is that it literally creates a complete redundancy for any other adductor in your training. You go to any other gym, and unless you got a gym pin, or you're lucky and you meet a stack that's decently heavy, you're just going to be doing reps for days with any other adductor. So you at that point would then place it right at the end of the session. But I like to place it up front. One of the biggest reasons for me is not just because I feel like it's an important exercise to develop the adductors and train them in a degree of isolation, but it's also for the preparation into my other movements. So adducting the hips in itself will drive, of course, a ton of blood all around the leg, into the hips, into the adductors. And the adductors play a huge role in terms of stabilizing the bottom of your leg press positions, the bottom of your squat positions, and just generally making you feel like more your squat and leg press patterns are on like train tracks. That's what I describe like the feeling of doing an adductor before a squat, is I feel like I'm literally on train tracks when I'm on my squat patterns. So if you struggle with like stability around your hip, think about mobilizing your hip more with potentially the use of adductors before you go into your squat patterns. And that's not even if your adductors are a strong or a weak area. It's simply down to exercise selection to make the most of your other movements, not exercise selection just to prioritize a muscle group. On this, I'll do as little as possible to get ready for the working set. And you'll see that trend throughout the entirety of my session. As little as possible warm up. Why? Maximize the load that I can use for my working sets. And that really is down to us knowing that mechanical tension is one of the biggest key players in hypertrophy outcomes, right? So that's going to result in our ability to drive the most force into the most amount of load close to failure. Now, proximity to failure and the most amount of load is the key principles that we want within all of our working sets. And to do that, it doesn't make sense to do a ton of feeder sets into one hard or two hard working sets. You're just going to take away load exposure and therefore reduce the amount of mechanical tension you're probably going to create in your working sets. So think about that when you're working up to your main movements of the day. The only way in which I feel like doing loads of feeder sets makes sense is when you're injured, when you're hurt, when you need to do feeder sets to reduce the load that you use on your working sets. But in all other circumstances, you want to maximize the amount of load that you have on the bar or on the machine. Most of you will know about this company already, Gympin. I think I actually have a code or anything, but I like them, they're great guys. So if you are struggling to load your machines, or even if you've run out of space on a weight peg, they actually do extenders for most machines, so you can extend out, like you can extend out the hack squat with one of their extenders. So, but these are superb for adductors. You know, a lot of people in gyms will meet the stack and be able to get it for like 20, 25 reps. With this, you might be able to therefore get more progress, add more load. So yeah, I mean, on a machine like this, it's super simple. You probably just place it wherever is the best in terms of it not clashing into anything. With this machine, you're lucky nothing hits it. Some machines, you have to go behind the back of the casing and things like that. But with this one, it's super easy. And at the moment, I'm still stacking like a 10 on top of the stack with this one for a low rep set. The low rep stuff still feels super comfortable for me right now. But maybe there will be a point where I remove the gym pin, but maybe I've made it like a personal challenge to myself to keep it the whole prep. So it's probably not going to come away, let's be honest. 1, 2, 3. Hup! Yes, 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 easy. Okay. So first set there was like a 6 repper. I'll now drop back down. I'll also change the profile. So the first set was on setting 5, which is like more mid-lengthened. I find setting 5 and setting 1 on this to be very similar. So I just find that maybe the mid-range on setting 1 is a little bit tougher to work through, and I find I hit more kind of just odd sticking points, whereas that setting 5 is more of a natural. It drops off where the adductors are, of course, weak, so it makes a little bit more sense. And then go over to like setting 3, which is all the way lengthened. So that means that I understand that people watching on YouTube might not know as much about people as people know on MBW about resistance profiles. So, you know, essentially the settings mean where the exercise is heaviest and where the exercise is lightest. So that's essentially a resistance profile of the machine, light versus heavy. And then you have strength profiles of muscles, which is where a muscle is strong and a muscle is weak. In this instance, the muscle, the adductor, is going to be very strong out of the stretch and then progressively weaker as we come into the contraction. So it makes sense, and it's the same with pretty much every single exercise. So, you know, it makes sense to have exercises that are biasing that length of position more if you can set them up that way. You know, it's why you wouldn't do, in a chest day or a push day, you wouldn't place like a hammer strength press last in your push day. It's an exercise that's very hard to get through that mid-short range. So they're just some practical examples of why altering resistance profiles can make sense, but you can still make phenomenal progress without even understanding what resistance profiles are. You just attack your sets, you just get strong. You just logbook your training, you eat enough and you grow. So like this is more of that like higher level of thinking that only applies if you have machines or you have a training sticking point that requires that thought process.
Is logbook going to survive prep?
This logbook is on its final legs. There are several pages that are just unidentifiable, lost in the ether, as we like to call it. This part of the book is completely separate to the rest. I've got some random shit here. It's all over the shop, if I'm honest with you, Alex. And the bad thing about it is I'm only a quarter of the way through the book. So it's typically from me just doing this, which funnily enough, that's not a way to treat a book, you know. You need to treat books with more respect than that. If you want a broken logbook, just throw it around. So yeah, but even with me, like pens, like I'll use a pen for the logbook until it literally is on its last legs, completely destroyed. So I don't know why, but it's like you form an emotional connection with the. It's like the hat, yeah. I mean, just look at this pile of shit. No, in all seriousness, there's a lot of sentimental value in this hat. I think if I lost it, it would be a bad day, that's for sure.
How long have you actually been wearing that hat?
Like, I don't know, like 10 plus years, at least. Yeah, it's bad, right? It does get washed, of course, but people that are wondering, like this is.
I do wash that hat.
It gets washed most weeks, so I'm not like a dirty person. And I have multiple versions of this tracksuit, but when I wear it regularly, I have another version or a washed version or something. So people out here thinking like I don't wash, it's not good. That 1, 2. Easy. Okay, so moving from the adductor into the leg extension. Placement of the leg extension for me, I always like to do it sort of further up the order than after the hacks and the leg presses. The reason being is because even with an adjustable profile on the prime, it becomes increasingly more challenging to nail the quad in the shortened position as it fatigues. So we're still going to have quite a lot of oomph and power for the hacks and for the leg presses, as you'll see with the loading that I'm able to do on both of them. But we're just gonna have more safety and we're gonna have more effectiveness from the leg extension. So it's just, again, it's like, it's not just thinking about what the exercise is bringing us in this moment with this placement, but it's about what happens on the other exercises as a result. And that's really I want you to think about that in terms of your own programming. Think a bit more like open-minded or holistically about like what's going on within the greater picture, the bigger picture, not just the small. So it's like, you know, if you think about a week of training, how does one session impact another? How does 1 week of training impact another week of training? And then the more like strategically you start to think about that, and it doesn't have to be complex, the more you'll get out of your training. So it's like simple things like this, smart exercise sequencing that allows you to get the most out of every single movement in every single session. So we'll do 2 sets here, both of which will be anywhere between 6 and 10 reps. Again, I'm more of a fan of keeping the reps kind of sub 10 on exercises like this, because I like to utilize a pretty controlled, steady, slow tempo, especially with it being the first like kind of heavier quad movement of the day. And just because I'm naturally relatively strong at extensions as well, so kind of controlling the whole movement makes a lot more sense rather than trying to be explosive with a load of weights. Because typically, the heavier you go, the more control you have to have, because the increase of injury just creeps up higher and higher as your load exposure goes up as well. Okay. Oh, fucking hell. So I kind of touched on it a little bit before I did the set there, but something I was actually chatting with Christian Kuss about in our session together in Vienna was kind of matching your tempos with your rep ranges. So especially on an extension like that with, you know, a 2 to 3 count eccentric phase, and yeah, powerful concentric, which it always should be, but like a 2 to 3 count eccentric, and then a small pause in the stretch. Like, you're not going to be doing a set of 15 to 20 reps with that tempo. And if you connect better or your knees feel better with 15 plus or 10 plus or 12 plus, go for it. Find what works for you. It's a really good deliverable message. But for me, like 8 to 10s feel amazing. I'm able to load them up a lot. And therefore, with that match of like rep range to tempo, it means that the sets are like almost like a minute long, but it's 8 reps, you know, so, and there's no pausing. So have a think about that with your rep ranges. If you're moving super slow, with a lot of control, with a lot of load, you're probably gonna have to bring those rep ranges down. That's where you'll find you'll make your most progress. So a small loading adjustment here. I've dropped like 15 pounds off the machine, and I've changed from setting 5 to setting 3. So I got 8 reps on the first set. With the setting change, making it a little less challenging in the short, and that 15-pound drop. This is the first time I'm doing this in a long time, so I'm kind of like giving you an idea of what I'm predicting rep range wise. This should fall into like a 7 or an 8 repper, I'm hoping. So that's just an example. Obviously, some people may need to drop off more load, some people may need to drop off less than me. And that's something that you learn over your training career, how much load you need to drop to match a rep range or to stay in a rep range over the course of many sets. And ultimately depends how far you're taking them to failure as well, or how close to failure you're taking them. And again. Yep. All right, so where are we at? Fourth movement, seated hamstring curl from prime. So again, using it in a very similar fashion to the leg extension and the adductor, going across setting 5 and setting 3. Those are my preferences. You don't have to copy them, but give them a shot, see how they feel for you. 2 sets of 8 to 10 here, again, so sticking similar rep ranges, not really sort of doing a sort of a lower rep and a higher rep, they're both in the 8 to 10. Some things about this machine is you have to have a training partner with you to get into it. Unfortunately, not quite as hard as the Gym 80 we used in Vienna, but still somewhat, I mean, Los can get into it just about on her own, but for me, I can't get the thigh pad down without having someone to help with the leg pad, so it's a little bit of a faff, but lucky enough, we usually train together, and as you've seen already, we get on like a house on fire, so it's perfect. Yep, okay, my bad. Yep. Perfect, yep. So one addition that you might want to think about with your seated hamstring curls, probably a lot of you have already tried this, but it's just a seat belt. Again, from Gym Pin, Assist Your Lift, Amazon, they do them everywhere. It doesn't really matter which one you get as long as it does its job. Really the only time that I really feel like this is super useful is when you're quite light in relevance to the loads you're using. So like right now I'm like what? Under 80 kilos, and I was using 104 kilos there. So it's pulling me out of the seat by quite a bit and creating a bit of kind of instability of the hips. And as a result, if you lose stability around your hips and your pelvis, you're gonna lose force production. Any part of your body that's less stable, you're gonna be producing less force. All you gotta think about, the more stable you can be, the more force you can create. And that's where the seat belt comes in handy. It will just keep you a little bit more locked in, a little bit more stable, and as a result, producing more force even when you're at lighter body weights. And some people might say, oh, why are you using a seatbelt? It's just stupid. Well, if it was so stupid, why are a lot of like top tier machine manufacturers putting them on the machines as part of the fabrication of the machine? It's because it makes it better, So like, if you're poo-pooing or shitting on people that wear seatbelts for a leg extension or for a leg curl, it's like, one, you probably haven't even tried it, or two, you just haven't like opened up your mind to think about the possibility it could actually be a bit better. 1, 2, 3, yep. Quite deep into the session now, and the first big movement of the day. Like I said, all of the other movements act as movements that fit well at that point in the session, but also feed into this. So these next two are kind of like the big daddy movements of the sessions. These are the ones that kind of, in the grand scheme of things, matter the most, and this is where I have to kind of flick my mindset on even more. And this is also why I like doing the isolations prior, is because it kind of allows me to slowly build up. It's almost like a crescendo up to the main movement, you know? And I feel like that psychologically works really well for me. For you, it might not be that case, and in which case doing your compounds further up the order might make a lot of sense for you in terms of how you feel throughout a session. But I've been doing this for many years with this order, it works well. So I'll gradually build up to between 7 and 8 plates, depending on how it feels. Last time I did 7.5, and I think it was 8 reps with really good control. So my mind is telling me 7 and a 15 aside, because it's a new movement and I am still actually progressing it. I hit a new body weight low this morning at 171 pounds. So, but that's not deciding where I go with loading on this. You know, body weight is like, it's one metric. You know, I've still got my leg muscle, so my leg muscle is going to move on this hack. You know, my leg muscle is doing the job. So I see no reason why I can't keep progressing it if it feels good. Something like this, however, the Cybex, something which I've been running for like 4 or 5 years. That ain't going to progress. That I'm not going to be hitting PBs in a diet on that. But something new, something novel. I've been running only for like 4 rotations now. We can still climb this up, no problems. No more holes left. And the final hole already. Fuck it. Let's give 8 a shot. Why not, eh? Come on! Happy with that. Whew. That felt really comfy. I'll look back at the clip, see whether there's anything I can do better next time, but pretty chuffed with that, I think. First time with 8 on this. I don't know how long. I don't know when the last time I did 8 on that, so pretty happy with, I think it was 8 reps. So now I've recovered from the hack, it's next up onto the leg press. Before we go into this, a few little points on the hack, because I'm aware that this is my first YouTube video in a long time. I want to make this like as long as possible, just full of as much value as you can possibly get. So with your hack stance, if your goal is to train your quads, we want as much knee flexion as possible, right? Now your individual tolerance to how much force you can create pressing off your midfoot versus pressing off your whole foot is wildly individual. So some people will come down, they're onto their midfoot like this, and they can produce a hell of a lot of force with no major changes up the chain. So if we look at it from a front angle, if we press off the midfoot and your knees collapse, or we press off the midfoot and one knee collapses and the hips the falls in as well. Obviously, that's not a position where you're going to produce much force, and it's a massive injury risk. For me, I think literally before even people were talking about heel lift, all of my squats and leg presses were done off my midfoot, like literally from day one. So it's only recently when I put up, the last maybe 5 years, I put up more training footage on Instagram that people are like, oh my God, your heels, you're out, they're off, you know, it's like, but then you see other people that are very well educated in the field of biomechanics and understanding the human body and understanding anatomy. And some of them are very much like, do what works within your tolerance, in agreement with me, which is what I do with my clients. I encourage them to try it, see how it feels, respond back to me. Either build the tolerance, or if it's a complete no-go, leave it and press off your whole foot. If you press off your whole foot, it's likely that your stance is going to have to be a little bit higher than mine. Mine is super low because I have the ability to produce a lot of force and not get hurt in that position. So hopefully that covers the stance side up. So lower the stance, more knee flexion, potentially even more stability at the pelvis as well, which is something we can talk about maybe in the future. That's simply down to where your back is on the pad. Your foot going higher up the platform, likely for a lot of people, sees a shift in the lower back and a shift in the pelvis to the bottom position. But we'll discuss that in another video. So that stance, breathing. So instead of doing what I used to do, which is the powerlifter brace, where you're like breathing in as if you're going underwater before the first rep, think more about setting your brace during the eccentric, because your back, your pelvis, everything is stabilized by the back pad. So the only real brace that you need on a hack is right as you change direction. So when you get into the bottom position, that's where you need to be tight. So on the way down, think about creating more of inhalation or the brace, the intra-abdominal pressure through your nose rather than through your mouth on the way down. So like middle way through, about here. Think about taking the brace, hold it in, let it out midway through the concentric. The reason why we don't want to breathe so much through the mouth is, one, you'll run out of air, okay? So you'll be gasping and breathing out, like panting like this, all through the mouth. So that's why composure is important too. Then, the other reason is rib cage. So when you're in a hack squat, you want your rib cage stacked directly over your pelvis. That's a position of power. So when you do this, your rib cage expands, it changes position. And when you're breathing and gasping for air, same thing with your rib cage. Your rib cage is constantly changing position. So try to keep composure, keep control, and do a lot of your breath work or bracing in the hack through your nose. Some game changes there you maybe haven't heard before. Give them a shot, let me know how you get along, comment below if you tried it, and yeah, feedback to me. Stance, breath work, pop some comments below. Gym leg press, the horizontal version, not the 45 degree, of course. I've never tried the 45 degree gym leg actually. For people who follow the channel, like, I am obsessed with kit. You know, I really talk about kit a lot. I talk about how one piece is better than another, and I've tried this, I've tried that. I love kit, so like, you know, when I see accounts like Mind Paradise Gym and stuff like that that have like, they resale loads of old pieces, those are some of my favorite accounts to follow. Nevertheless, gym leg hip press. So there's two loading pins. Basically, the one that I load is the one that's always closest to the axis. In layman's terms, it's the easier peg. It is, because the other one, the one that's furthest away, the lower pin, is always further away from the axis. So it makes it harder in the stretch and harder in the mid-short, because it's always further away. Anything that's further away from the axis of rotation, for people that want to understand that, it's where the machine pivots around. So this here is the axis of rotation. So that furthest away peg is always further away. So at this point in the session, if I was to load that peg, it's so brutally hard for me to get through the middle range and then into the lockout that it just makes it like too hard to break through that range. and I get quite a bit of like knee cave in that position. Whereas with this peg, I find that it's a lot more comfortable and equally a lot more progressible because it's just an easier peg. It's still very challenging, and it's a nice and even challenge throughout the whole range. It doesn't particularly drop off anywhere. So yeah, those are the two loading pegs. Take your pick. If you're using it for the first time, I'd probably just evenly distribute your weight. That's what I recommend to most clients. And then just see how you get along and see how it feels for you. I know a lot of people that end up just loading the top peg for the exact same reasons as me, I think.
Now we go. Now you're let's get it. Yes! Rep by rep, let's go. Come on. Give me the fucking sack. No problems. No problems for you. Come on now.
I said I don't need you, bitch. Go ahead and leave you. Broke it down over one of the laws, a little homie.
I had to really work for that one. That was surprising. Like I think I jumped from 4 to 6, and I think I should have definitely done 5 to bridge the gap. It felt the first rep, my body hadn't accumulated to the low jump, and it's still something that is not a movement that I'm super skilled with. So sometimes I don't have the total preparation by doing like quite low warm-ups. Whereas if I was to do that on pretty much any other leg press in the gym, I'd be completely fine. And it's also just the profile as well. It's just so unforgiving that if you don't warm up well enough, you'll fucking just spits you out of the machine. And I haven't done it in a few weeks as well. But just shitty excuses really, to be honest. It was still a decent set, but the hack was arguably a little bit better than the leg press today, but that's cool. So last exercise of the day for legs, a Nautilus glute drive. So I was doing it on the Smith, and if I'm being honest, I prefer the Smith, but it's a Saturday, and the gym is a slight bit busier than normal, which, I mean, it doesn't look it, but it is normally quite quiet during the weekdays. So I always kind of just like take a recce at the gym, and I'm like, who's on the Smith? You know, how long are they going to be? And if they're going to be a while, like I'll just always come here because it's basically the same thing. I just prefer the Smith because I don't particularly like the arc of this particular hip thrust. I prefer just a straight up and down path of the Smith, but I still get good glute work done here. So I do one warm up with 4 plates, and then I'll work with 6. Again, 8 to 10 rep range on this. So pretty much the majority of my work is like 8 to 10 reps, and the occasional like on the hip press I did a 6 repper. So yeah, occasionally like the lowest I'll probably go is 6. Anywhere between 6 and 10 is pretty much where I work within. And that's not specifically to a diet, that's just in general throughout my whole season as well. Another disadvantage of this one is it absolutely fucks your hips up. Like this bit of like your, like above your hip, just like it bruises it, makes it all sore. So I sound like a complete pussy, to be honest. But it does, it's genuinely annoying. So you could use a pad, but the other downside of this is the fucking re-rack. This is the bane of my life at the end of the session. It's like, there's almost a 50-50 risk as to whether you're actually gonna be able to re-rack it or not. So normally getting a hand in is definitely preferable here. But nevertheless, that's the leg component of the session done. And yeah, pretty happy with performance across the board, to be honest, especially at this point in the process. I'm very happy with it. So that's what's going to hold on to this issue as well. Like, basically not backing down. Not backing down on load, not backing down on intensity, not backing down on anything. So, and that's not just something that I do for a video, you know. Like, that's again a common misconception about intensity, is that you have to scream, you have to shout, you have to film it, you know. I film a lot of my training, but a lot of it I don't even post. A lot of it's just for me. And the way that I train, the sets that I do, is a large part down to just the passion that I have for bodybuilding in general. And this is the way that I trained before I even had a YouTube channel, before I even had someone filming my content, before I even filmed my own training. So I just love it. And I encourage you to find that yourself. And that actually will probably come from spending a good few years without feeling the need to have to post up everything you do. Just search for your own passion. So I feel like a lot of the time people are trying to find their passion in and amongst social media. So their passion becomes not the training, but the posting and the likes and the comments and the endorphin rush that you get when you post up something that is cool, or you perceive as cool. Remember that whatever you do is, or should be, fueled by your own desires, your own passion, your own dedication. So hopefully that helps a little bit for you to work out where you're at and where your motivation, your mindset should be at for bodybuilding. Okay, so coming to the end of the session now, and this is where I previously had the ab work and some of my arm work at the start, but I've just kind of distributed a little bit more towards the end. Again, obviously there's a trade-off in that, in the sense that I am definitely carrying a little bit more fatigue than when I come in fresh, but equally I like the fact that I'm able to focus on that a little bit more at the start of the session when it comes to the stuff that really matters on this day, which is training my legs. So alternatively, I could put this onto a rest day, but right now, especially from like not even a physical management, but more of a mental management, I need my full rest days because they're so important for me, especially with managing workload. So on those days, I schedule more programming, more client calls, more of the things that, in a normal day, fitting it around regular client check-ins is more of a task. So it kind of means that every session I do, I'm coming in also mentally fresh. All right, so one of my favorite bicep movements, if I'm gonna do a bilateral bicep movement, it's probably gonna be this, an incline cable curl. So a few cues on this one is obviously setup and positioning is super important. So take like one step away from the cable stack. You don't need to come all the way out here. Just one step away, sorry mate. One step away is completely fine. And then cable height, I like pretty much, like it can be anywhere really, but for me it's like around about knee height. That kind of feels the best for me. You don't want it too high. If it's too high, your shoulder's gonna be elevated, you're gonna be pulling like this. So there's about right. And then the big key to kind of keep a little bit more length and bias is keep that upper arm behind the torso. And then try and keep it there as you come into elbow flexion. So instead of like coming up like this and driving the upper arm forwards, try and just keep the upper arm back there, close the gap think about closing that gap, pause a little bit in the stretch, rinse and repeat. I don't tend to go too heavy on these, if I'm being honest with you. I don't tend to go too heavy on arms in general anymore. I lose connection very fast when I go too heavy and too sloppy on arms. I'm still relatively strong at them, but not flinging around load, because it just kind of gets me nowhere with arms, unfortunately. So just 2 sets there for biceps, and then we will finish off with an overhead variant for the triceps. For me, the way that I kind of prioritize my tricep volume a little bit more, and there's a huge amount of debate still about whether doing overhead work works the long head more. I'm gonna take the educated opinion that the long head will get biased a little bit more in overhead work, and even if it's not that much, I want to do more overhead work than I do push down work. The reason being is that when you're in a side tricep, which is actually a relatively strong pose for me, my kind of like more short head or medial head of the tricep is pretty well developed, whereas like the long head that kind of sits a little bit more in the front double bicep underneath the arm, and kind of fills this gap in the front double bicep. If you've got loads of bicep and not enough tricep, you know, your front double looks weak. So for me, the front double's always been weaker than like side shots. So therefore I've always, like the whole off season, programmed my top up tricep work to be more overhead biased. You don't have to copy this, you don't have to do this. Train your triceps in a more shortened position, train your triceps in a more lengthened and overhead position. That's all you have to do for your own training. When you get to the point where you can pick apart poses, perhaps you can program your tricep training or bicep training according to the weak poses and the stronger poses. But like I said, I've been competing since like 2014, so I kind of have some poses now which I need to break down a bit more. In terms of overhead tricep movements go, this is pretty much, in my opinion, from a alignment standpoint and setting it up with stability, is probably as perfect as it gets, to be honest. Credit to Ben Yanes, who I first saw set up this movement. Very smart dude, and puts out a lot of really good content with regards to anatomy, biomechanics, and understanding kind of how to set up exercises which might look a little bit like one of those like memes you see, or like those comparisons of this is how tricep training looked in 1980 versus 2010, and it's like all of those things that like, reality is, you know, you can do both. You know, you can do both, like the EZ bar overhead extensions, the dumbbell skull crushers, the heavier loaded movements. And then you can also combine it with exercises like this, which are a little bit more like modern day, with a calf, with the upper arm supported on the cable sack. It's like, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel with those things. It's more so just trying to find whether it's an appropriate exercise for certain individuals. Because some people might be able to grow like massive triceps with no like thought process as to exercises that might work a little bit better. And for me, exercises like this in combination with more basic old school movements have been what's allowed my arms to step forwards. I looked back at my arms in like 2020 and especially like 2017, I mean, man, I literally had like absolute twigs for arms. So the fact that I've got some decent arms, or some balance, more balanced to proportional arms now, is a large part down to learning a little bit more about arm training. Doesn't come without effort as well. Arm training still requires the same amount of effort as everything else. So even if it is with a cuff, even if it is with a cable, it's still effort that is the most important thing. So those reps gradually slowed down until I failed in the stretch. I couldn't get another rep. Just because it's with a cuff, it doesn't mean it's a pumpy, squeezy movement. And I think this is, again, the misconception that people have, is that cables or cuffs means easy. It does not mean easy. It means, in a lot of ways, you know, sometimes because of the environment you put yourself in with exercise, you can actually make it harder for the muscle, perhaps, you know, rather than harder for other things that have to stabilize the movement, you know. So I think this will be a discussion until the end of my time in the fitness industry, to be honest. So, but I always want to make sure that what people get from my videos is not the perfect exercise, is not that this is the go to tricep movements or whatever. It's like, just look at the effort. Just look at the effort. That's all that really matters that you take home from these videos. And that's why I love when people look back at like the How I Train Legs at 6 weeks out video that like we shot with Cuba back in 2020, and like I'm like screaming and like he's screaming, and like that's just like, it's just cool shit. It's just effort, you know. And that taught me, that period of time especially taught me a hell of a lot about effort. And it's something that I still apply with everything I do in life, bodybuilding, business, everything. Effort is king. All right, guys, that brings us to an end of leg day and an end of episode 1 of this prep series. So this has probably been a very, very long video, I can imagine, unless we've managed to work some incredible magic from Alex's side and crop it down to something less than an hour. I spoke a lot in this one. Perhaps there'll be more short form moving forwards, but I want to make sure that I can give like as much value as possible in these videos. So if you stayed around until the end, let's do a George Osborne technique and say, we'll comment below MBW. And if we have some people that are avid followers, I really appreciate you that have stayed around until the end. And like I said, my goal, my ultimate goal, is to always create an impact, leave an impact on natural bodybuilding. And that is what this is going to be like, just everything else that I do. Creating impact and leaving an impact. So if you haven't already checked out the fact that we've got the first MBW show, which is an international event running in 2 days, the 11th and 12th in October of 2025. If you haven't checked that out already, check it out. If you're competing in 2025 in the fall and the end of the year, please do consider that as a show. I can promise you we will deliver, and a show that will be putting the athletes first. So check that out. Check out MBW if you haven't already. And before we end, just like I said, a huge thank you to everyone that is going to be following along with this series. I'm super excited for it. Chat soon, guys.